Um, well, thank you all for coming. I'm Chris Beam. I'm the Managing Director at the McCourtney Institute for Democracy, and this is right there, our first use of the banner. We wanted to reinvigorate, reestablish these democracy roundtables because we thought, especially with the campaign year, that it was a real opportunity to reflect not on the horse race, but what the campaign was kind of telling us about the condition of democracy or the body politic in general. And so that's why President Jordan is here. That's Jordan with an A. Not an O, so the misspelling. Matt Jordan is an associate professor in the College of Communications, does media studies, film studies, cultural studies, wrote a book on jazz in French culture. But the reason he's here is because he wrote a piece for The Conversation that was picked up by the Washington Post about the change in how debates operate with various networks. And I brought this up here because I wanted to get this right. In that piece, he said, "The democratic process has been usurped by an endless ratings-driven spectacle." So that's kind of important for what the campaign says about the condition of democracy. So that's why he's here, and we're very pleased to welcome him. Thank you very much.
So as you can tell, what I'm going to give you is a bit of a provocation. The medical symbol over there is in the middle of all that is deliberate. So I want to think a little bit of kind of a media theory approach to thinking about what has happened as democracies become mediated. In particular, this year's bonanza of ratings is particularly telling, I think, in terms of where things are going. It's I would argue, a long trend. Here's that's basically is born with television, the concern about how television is going to impact democracy. And long before Marshall McLuhan started talking about this in his work, debates between Kennedy and Nixon being the kind of the beginning of a way of thinking about how this is going to impact democracy. One of my favorite films, A Face in the Crowd, dealt with this.
Politics have entered a new stage, a television stage. Instead of long-winded public debates, the people want capsule slogans. Time for a change, the mess in Washington, more bang for the buck, punchlines and glamour. Yes, Mr. Purvis, even glamour.
So if you know this movie at all, you should. If you don't, it's about a kind of a right-wing populist guy who becomes a political force by mobilizing all this affect of the people who follow him, and he treats it just like his reality show. He has a kind of a talent show, and he captures the audience because they identify with him. And he kind of it's about his rise and fall based on that, and it's a warning, I think, about the impact that putting democracy on TV is going to have. So he's talking about how to sell people just like you sell beer, right? Candidates are to be sold just like you would sell soap or any other commercial. It's about creating a relationship with your consumer. So mediated democracy, I kind of want to say, in the age of identity politics, has become a hit series that essentially jumped from network to network. And it's part reality show, part melodrama, the soap opera in there. Where the real winners, no matter who wins the particular debates, are the media companies themselves. And this is very much a kind of medium is the message. It's constructing for us a taste for this type of deliberative discourse. So in terms of my thinking about this, one of the things I want to raise out there as an initial thought is that television, like all modes of communication, teaches us how to think. It teaches us how to perceive. It teaches us frames of evaluation. It constructs us as subjects. And what this is doing is it's constructing us as subjects who receive, perceive, and deal with deliberative democracy in a very particular way. And if you want to get a sense of how that is, just look at how this commercial pitches the debates. Right? Does that remind you of anything? It's the same way they plug sports, right? It's the same way they would plug a professional wrestling match, give you the lineups. It's conflict. The music is kind of driving us to think about it in terms of the clash among these people. The graphics are kind of driving that home and whatnot. But it's essentially setting it up as a spectacle of conflict, which is what these things are doing. And this is largely what the ratings have been driven crazy on. And the ratings are, because of this conflict driving a serial spectacle, are kind of working in tandem with one another, right? So the way a series televisions work is that each thing becomes a promo for the next, and there's lots of cliffhangers in there. There's lots of plot lines that could turn out, and they build on themselves. It's an effective series, right? You build audience based on what happened last. And if you look at the stuff that's in between these, not only in terms of the promotions, but also all of the cross promotions and synergies that happen with this. This is an enormous driver of media content right now. You see how these work as serial, and the ratings have been just unbelievably spectacular. This is the ratings for just the GOP side of things. You start with the first couple, which were 24 and 23 million, right? There's nothing else on television except for sports that is getting those kinds of ratings, right? The Oscars is going to get like 37 million. I just saw yesterday where they're selling ads for 1.8 million for a 30-second spot on the Oscars, which is an incredible grab. But when you have audiences this big in an era of kind of audience disintegration, which is what's happening across all media platforms, with the kind of explosion of content, all the choices between people, television shows don't have big audiences. But these do, right? So you have sports. I think what the 30-second spot for the Super Bowl went for like 4.4 million, right? Because people who sell ads or buy ads, I should say, are desperate to get access to large kind of cross-demographic audiences. So when you have ratings like this, it creates enormous economic leverage, enormous pressure for these networks to do things like this. So again, this works by creating serial characters, people that you follow, people that you root for, people that you identify, and you watch them from network to network, right? And so part of the drama is not only how they're going to clash with one another, but also how the networks are going to do, because this becomes a story as well, right? Is Fox Business News going to do better than CNBC, because they're in competition with one another? Is CNN going to cover politics better than Fox? So half of their advertisement tends to be snarky little ads against one another, because that's what they're doing, is they're building their brand at a time when the stuff is driving.
The third one was this past weekend, the Saturday before Christmas. It brought in even fewer viewers than the previous one. Nielsen numbers look like it's roughly 7.85 million people who watch Saturday night. And of course, the Republicans have been putting up blockbuster ratings for their zillions of primetime, highly promoted debates, some of which have had over 20 million people watching them. But look at this. Compare these ratings to 2012. Remember, 2012, President Obama was running for re-election, so there's no Democratic Party debates, right? It's just the Republicans holding their hilarious, riveting, bizarro 2012 primary with Herman Cain and Newt Gingrich and all the rest of them. And in 2012, the Republican debates were the best show on television by a mile. And I say that as a person with a TV show on television. Everybody was watching the Republican debates in 2012. You could not turn away. But compare the numbers. More people watched the Democratic debate this past Saturday than watched any of the Republican debates in 2012. What? More people watched the Democratic debate this past Saturday than almost every other Democratic debate in 2008, which was the Barack Obama-Hillary Clinton blockbuster year. There were 15 debates that year on the Democratic side. The fourth highest rated debate that year was held on MSNBC. It drew 7.77 million viewers. This Saturday debate, this snoozer, Saturday night before Christmas, beat that number. Did I mention that was Hillary versus Barack?
Right, so the numbers are just, trajectories are just going up. Right? And there, again, I think it builds on itself because it's such a profitable entertainment for people to do. So this is part of the story is, right, this as a spectacle that is drawing people's attention, and that is, by virtue of that, kind of figuring out how it can draw more people's attention, and this kind of compounds the problem. But this is also part of a trend in the way that news is operated. Now, here's I often think of these things through the movie Network, and here's a little thing to get us started on the slide.
Point 1. The division producing the lowest rate of return has been the news division, with its $98 million budget and its average annual deficit of $32 million. I know that historically news divisions are expected to lose money, but to our minds this philosophy is a wanton fiscal affront to be resolutely resisted.
So Network is based on this moment when all of a sudden there's this pressure from corporate to start making news divisions profitable. Before this, it's a kind of a loss leader, right? They give news away as part of their public service agreement in terms of being granted monopoly over the airwaves, right, by the FCC. So they were expected to lose. But in the 1970s, this firewall goes down, and all of a sudden news starts to become more profitable. And as it does, it becomes more telegenic. It becomes more TV-oriented, and that's what starts to drive the ratings. And you see a trend going the opposite way, right? A trend toward profitability, a trend toward the things that has made news it is the way it is today. So again, this is the issue that Network has with this is just slightly at odds with our notions about the role of the press in a deliberative democracy, right? If we are to exact the kind of will of consent to be governed, we need information. That's why we need freedom of the press, right? Because if we don't have the capacity to make informed decisions, we're not being well governed, right? That's democracy's predicated on, which is why they used to give the people the airwaves so that we could get all this information. But again, this is as profit has kind of crept into the equation. This has become an anxiety, and that's the kind of basic anxiety that Network raises. So today, we're seeing a complete reversal of this. Network news is now one of the most profitable aspects of television programming, right? Because it's perfect for TV. It's completely bare bones production value. It's very cheap to produce. Increasingly cheap to produce because nobody's spending any money on reporting anymore. It's just commentary about the news, right? So you put people up there, you put them in news-looking outfits, you work on lighting so they're all very pretty, and then you give it to these enormous audiences. So again, in terms of an era of audience disintegration, news is the one aspect that is not disintegrating. News networks, the network news has increased by about 5% the last couple of years. This is an era when everything else is losing, right? So it's stripped down, everybody watches it, or lots of people watch it, and you get that. In terms of how these debates have helped cable news has not done as well because, again, cable news, a lot of competition and whatnot. Cable news has been down around 8%, but this year has reversed those trends as well because all of a sudden they've got a hit reality show that everybody wants a part of. So cable news has gotten a shot in the arm from this thing. Fox has had better ratings than they've had since 2012 because of a lot of this, because there's so much cross-promotion and so much discussion of what's going on all of their other channels. So again, the other context for this is the kind of turning the spigot on high in terms of campaign finance. It is hard to underestimate or overestimate even the impact that this has had on the political process. So 81% of political ads now are funded by super PACs. There was just a story today out there. The IRS has decided that super PACs are going to be, I'll do that. Oh. Super PACs are going to be considered nonprofits by the IRS, which means they can continue to be anonymous, which means they can continue to have an unlimited capacity to fund. And this has created, I think one of the numbers I saw was a 41% increase in political advertising. So it's not only the amount of ads that are being sold on these shows that are kind of about political debates, but it's also all the ads that are about the political debates that are being shown on other channels at the same time, right? So along with this, you have an enormous growing political fundraising apparatus. There's a number on this. There's an article in The Atlantic which was talking about this in relation to Ben Carson. 11.2 of the 20 million that he had raised when this article came out in November went to the fundraising apparatus itself. So that's 54 cents of every dollar going to the fundraisers. That is an industry in and of itself, and that's going on for everyone, right? So all of these people, you get all these emails that are also a way of pulling us into the process as well. You know, our contribution to democracy is about giving to these fundraising apparatuses in order to buy the ads to kind of pull us into the whole kind of cross-promotional, cross-synergy spectacle, as it were. So this just came out. This is just a number of political ads by the candidates. Again, not about the ads that are sold on the programs, but just by candidates. You can see that even, this is just up to the beginning of January, we've already kind of outpaced anything that we've seen before, and we're only just getting started as well. So, and that's only half. So the ad buys for these things during the debates themselves are at historic levels in terms of profitability for the networks, right? So I think the lowest ones have been about 150,000, but the peak ones are around 300,000, right? So if you can tell advertisers that you have people who are watching, 24 or 20 million people who are watching, you can use what they would call surge pricing, right? Surge rate pricing, and you just say, this is what it'll take to get you there. So this is about 25 to 40 times the normal ad prices for that same time of the night on these networks, right? Yeah.
Are the candidates themselves being charged these surge prices? Are candidates themselves advertising during the debate?
No, so this would be for like the Geritol or whoever wants to advertise during the GOP debate or during the Democratic debate, right? And they've now kind of situated these debates where there are commercial breaks, just the way there is for football. You know, you have these, if you've ever been to a football game, there's a lot of timeout where you wait for the commercial to come back. They now have a lot of those built-in breaks in the debates themselves because they have to cut to commercial. So more and more of it is cut to commercial, and they're making a killing on this. This is saving these networks in many ways. So again, this creates a huge structural incentive to create a spectacle that is increasingly intelligent, increasingly about the mode of television and the mode of getting those audiences. Because if you are in a kind of a news division that is not making as much money, and all of a sudden you get to primary season, you want those huge audiences. And even in the cases, like they were worried about Trump canceling the debate, they still got $260,000 per 30-second spot on that debate where he canceled because they sold the ads long before he canceled. Right? So this is creating this juggernaut, essentially, of TV with all those economic incentives. And it's not only the nationals, it's also the locals that are making out like bandits on this. Sinclair Broadcasting and Hearst, these are the two big owners of television stations in America in terms of the local. The footprint, the amount that they made, Sinclair in Iowa, I think they made 40 million of ads in Iowa. The average cost of an ad to WMUR, which is the Hearst affiliated in Manchester, New Hampshire, was $900. In the last election this year, it's over $1,600, and primetime spots can be double that. The 40% of the primary spending was to that one station in New Hampshire, right? So this is creating enormous profitability for these stations as well. It's gotten to the point where I read this article that local ads are now so expensive in this that a lot of the super PACs are just choosing to do national ads because in terms of getting some of those big audiences like Wheel of Fortune and things like this where you get these swaths of the people that are right in the sweet spot, especially for the Republican candidates, they're charging about as much as they would charge on Fox News. And so the super PACs are just buying national ads as well, right? So the structural incentives being what they are, nobody wants the system to change. The networks are making out, and the stations are making out like bandits. And this kind of brings me...
First rule of Fight Club is, you do not talk about Fight Club. Second rule of Fight Club is, you do not talk about Fight Club.
Right, so this is the logic operating in television. There was just looked at this thing on Media Matters, and was looking at the amount of time spent on campaign finance reform. They do these things where it's a minute spent or time spent on segments. And aside from PBS, even in a campaign where a candidate is driving this as an issue, it's almost nothing. Less than an hour between September 15th and January 15th on the three major networks spent on campaign finance, right? Why? Economic incentive, right? It's not in their interest to have anybody talking about the corrosive impact of money on the political system. And this is even when this is one of the main platforms of one of the candidates. And that's the only thing I think that would have them talking about it. So again, it's structural issues. So I put Pierre Bourdieu there. Bourdieu has this notion of a symbolic violence that I think is helpful, right? And symbolic violence is the stuff that happens when we censor ourselves. It's a combination of tacit approval from the kind of both sides of the equation. And it kind of works like this on television, where in order to be a professional, in order to do well on the thing, they invite people back who are going to play the game well, right? Who are going to give you sound bites, who are going to give you telegenic performances, who have good hair, et cetera, et cetera. So it tends to self-select. People censor themselves, and this is a kind of symbolic violence on the process. And television does this through the things that it does well. Television tends to visualize things in a sensational way, right? That's the rules of television. This is why you don't have a lot of stories about structural economic problems, and why you have a lot of stories about exploding things, right? Or terrorists, if we have some video on them. Why? Because it's good TV. Candidates or speakers who can reduce things to kind of little McNuggets of wisdom. They invite them back again and again because it's good sound bites. Why? Because it's good for TV. Time becomes this enormous thing on television as well, and it starts to whittle things down to the format that is required, right? So they know that you're going to have to cut to commercial, so if anybody goes on too long, you got to figure out a way to do it. So time, which is this really important things in terms of our discourses, in terms of our patterns of deliberation, is reduced to these very small things. So we have sensationalism, we have time, we have topics that are being selected, and all of these things are being selected based on what is good for television. Right? And this is what Bourdieu means by a kind of symbolic violence, where we then start to be subsumed into a way of seeing the world, especially the reality effect that television brings. So all of those are kind of elements of this. I'm just going to put that thing up as well. So I just described some of these, but one that I didn't describe, and I think this is probably the most important one in Bourdieu's argument, is what he calls the circular circulation of information, which is the tendency of politics on TV to be completely self-referential, relating to what other journalists say about things, relating to what the consensual opinion about what other journalists say and what other politicians say. Just circulates a kind of refracting and reflection of a very small kind of beltway view of the world, and that is not really dealing with a lot of other things. So all of these are kind of modes of wielding symbolic violence over the democratic system. So the pundits and the politicians, I think, know it. I like this quote from Rand Paul, right? We have approximately 20 million people want to watch, so we should negotiate. People should bid for this. In fact, I think the networks ought to pay the Republican Party to air it, right? They know they've got a hit show, right? And this is why Donald Trump has been able to use so much leverage in getting things the way he wants. Because networks say, oh, sure, whatever you say. And pundits know it, right? They know this is Brian Stelter, but Anderson Cooper's things exactly like this, So it's like when CNBC had that debate where all of a sudden it became the tactic to attack the media, right? That was part of the conflict of that particular show. They should have been ready for it, right? Because they should know that this is what TV is all about. It's about conflict. And this is, what Donald Trump knows very, very well as well, right? Having done The Apprentice for a long time, having brought Omarosa back many times because everybody hated her. Nobody could take their eyes off her. So you have in all of this, you have kind of a perfect storm setup. You have a kind of great unrest among the people because people aren't doing as well as they would like to do. Kind of feeling that the system is rigged. All of this kind of setting up for what we've seen this year. So
Yesterday, did any of you read it?
This is Diane's marketing report from Network.
In a nutshell, it said, the American people are turning sullen. They've been clobbered on all sides by Vietnam, Watergate, the inflation, the depression. They've turned off, shot up, and they fuck themselves limp, and nothing helps. So, this concept analysis report concludes the American people want somebody to articulate their rage for them. I've been telling you people since I took this job 6 months ago that I want angry shows. I don't want conventional programming on this network. I want counterculture. I want anti-establishment.
And from that, we get...
One of the things people love about you is you speak your mind and you don't use a politician's filter. However, that is not without its downsides, in particular when it comes to women. You've called women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals. Your Twitter account...
Only Rosie O'Donnell.
No, it wasn't. Your Twitter account...
Thank you.
For the record, it was well beyond Rosie O'Donnell.
Yes, I'm sure it was.
Your Twitter...
This country is in big trouble. We don't win anymore. We lose to China. We lose to Mexico. What I say is what I say. And honestly, Megan, if you don't like it, I'm sorry. I've been very nice to you, although I could probably maybe not be based on the way you have treated me, but I wouldn't do that. But you know what? Is there anyone on stage, and can I see hands, who is unwilling tonight to pledge your support to the eventual nominee of the Republican Party and pledge to not run an independent campaign against that person? Again, we're looking for you to raise your hand now. Raise your hand now if you won't make that pledge tonight. Mr. Trump. So, Mr. Trump, to be clear, you're standing on a Republican primary. I fully understand. If I do win and I'm leading by quite a bit, that's what I want to do. I can totally make that pledge. If I'm the nominee, I will pledge I will not run as an independent. But I'm discussing it with everybody. But I'm, talking about a lot of leverage. We want to win, and we will win. One of these. This is what's wrong. I mean, this is what's wrong. He buys and sells politicians of all stripes. He's already, he's already hedging his bet on the Clintons, okay? So if he doesn't run as a Republican, maybe he supports Clinton, or maybe he runs as an independent. Okay. But I'd say that he's already hedging his bets because he's used to buying politicians. Well, I've given him plenty of money. Mr. Trump, hold on one second. Newsflash. I know, hold on, sir. Newsflash, the Republican Party's been fighting against a single-payer system for a decade. So I think you're on the wrong side of this if you're still arguing for a single-payer. I don't think you heard me. You're having a hard time tonight.
All right, Mr. Trump, about the latest example, which is Trump Entertainment Resorts, which went bankrupt in 2009. In that case alone, lenders to your company